Hi everyone, Messy Coder back again with part 3 of my asset dev interview with Adam Goodrich. Adam is the creator of CTS, Gaia, Gena, Pegasus and a load more. And in this video we finally get our hands dirty and we start playing about with Gaia and Gena. We create a world of our very own. We start to use Gena to make that world come to life. This video was taken on my live Twitch stream, all the W's, twitch.tv/themessycoder, where you can come and see me every weekend playing about, making games, talking to game developers, and sometimes we give away some juicy free assets and toys to play with. So sit back, enjoy, and I'll see you all in a second.
Bahaha.
Right, let's get back inside. So I've just clicked on that. Just back to standard. I clicked on number 1, create terrain and show stamper, and piff paff poof, magically I've got this appeared in my scene. And on the left hand side, so we can see Gaia managers here. There we've got the session manager, we've got the stamper, and we've got another object here for the Gaia environment.
So what would you like to do now with the demonstration? We could just run a pre-existing session to use it to play back an existing Gaia environment, or you could create a whole new environment.
What should we show how quickly it is to be able to just click 1, 2, 3 and just set something up, and then we can do a playback if you want.
All right, sounds cool. So zoom out so we can see your terrain. So what Gaia's done here is it's created a 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer terrain. So, imagine this as your cookie dough. And, from here, the next thing we want to do, and what it's also done, actually, you might as well make this informational and useful for people. So go to the Gaia directory, and yep, that's it, and show up the data directory. And just slide your little thing so I can read the file names.
Where's my little thing?
That's it, yep. So look at Gaia defaults. So this scriptable object has all of the settings that are used to create the terrain. So if you've ever looked inside of a terrain itself in its settings, you'll see this information. So the concept behind Gaia defaults is every time you create a new terrain, this is what drives it. So what you can do is you can create different sets of settings. So somebody asked about, hey, is there a mobile setup for Gaia? I should add one in. It's basically just changing, instead of the height map resolution being, say, 1025, we might drop that down to 256. It's just a matter of changing these values so that it is more in line with your target hardware. But this is what Gaia uses to create its environment. So then click on Gaia resources, which is the next one down.
So let me just ask you, because we're doing a brief intro into scriptable objects. Not sure if you've seen those videos, and it's made me leap with joy as soon as you said that word, scriptable object. So for those who don't know, what was the reason behind you using scriptable objects for these defaults and these resources objects?
Well, I needed to store the data somewhere, and this was a nice persistent way of doing it. I'm actually wrestling with scriptable objects in origami at the moment. So they're very powerful. They're really good because you can modify them at runtime, not that you typically want to with Gaia, but you certainly do with CTS. But yeah, it was the standard Unity data type object, so that's why I used it.
They're lovely.
It's interesting. There's probably almost as much work in the user interface for Gaia as there is in the actual tool itself. And even these, with the scriptable objects, I just went, I got to the point where I'm not spending another month on writing even more wrappers around this user interface. So the resources one is fairly raw. But if what the resources is, these are the assets that get put into your terrain. So if you open up the little thing that says texture prototypes.
Let me just get rid of my little logo. So here we go. People can actually see the screen now for a change. So which one do you want me to open up, mate?
So up inside yep, that's it. So this is actually all of the resources that Gaia adds to your terrain from this resources file. If you want to actually change what goes into a Gaia terrain, duplicate this and just update the assets with the assets that you want to use. So if you open up one of those textures, and so here we can see the links to the physical textures and some settings for how they go into the terrain. And then if you open up the spawn criteria, so what Gaia does, and just open one more, this is actually what Gaia's doing using to decide how that texture goes into your environment. So I have this concept which I call fitness. You know, how fit is this location on the terrain for this thing to go there? And that's actually what these settings are. It's all hidden away. You don't even know about it most of the time. There's also a visualization tool that allows you to see how these things influence what goes into your environment. But it's all driven by these underlying rules. And so what this resources file does is it basically stores the raw materials that go into your environment. So now let's click on the terrain itself, the terrain object. And I'll just show you how this actually translates. So now go into the paintbrush icon. So all of those textures, when we hit create stamp, or create terrain and stamper, all of this stuff was taken out of your data, those data files, and used to pre-populate all this stuff in your environment. So this makes it, once you've done it once and you customize it to your game, you never need to do it again because it's stored forever in those scriptable objects. So now let's actually do some stamping. So your stamper is the tool that we use to put stuff into our environment. So I'm gonna guide you through creating something interesting. So you can do the whole random generation thing, but I really like to craft my environments. So the first thing I want you to do is we're going to put in a valley. We're going to create a valley environment. We're going to put a river in it, and then we're going to populate it with content. So go to your stamps directory.
1 second, bud.
It's good that you know where to go, so you have been using it.
Well, that's the other thing, that we had a chat with Aquarius last week and with 3D Forge as well about folder structure in an asset, and it is very important to keep things neat and tidy and to make it easy, not just intuitive to use an interface, but also intuitive of where to find folders and files in the asset that you're using.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, how you lay stuff out is super important. So let's go click on the folder that says valleys, because these have got all the stamps that are the valley stamps. And then zoom your little thing so we can see the full size of those images, your little Duvalaka. So these are grayscale previews of these valleys. And where it's white, it means it's high. And where it's dark, it means it's low.
So which one do you want, mate?
So let's click back on our stamper. And let's drag Chumash Valley into the stamp preview.
Oh.
Cool. So now Gaia has created a 3D preview mesh. Gaia has this concept of sea level. So the sea level is set at 50 meters in this environment. And so you can visualize where the sea level will be. So let's zoom in a little bit and lift that stamp up. So select your little cross mover lacquer. Yeah, that's it. Beautiful. Now, when you try and move it up, it's going to complain. So just unclick the ground base button.
I remember you, Tick. We've just got Yolan's asking one question on folder structure. Why do you store generated assets under Gaia directory instead of a separate directory?
That's a good question. In hindsight, I should have done it differently. But I also wanted to keep things tidy. You know, if I did it a second time round, I'd actually, all the stuff that you create, I'd store it in a separate directory. And somebody asked...
Yeah, about real world data. I was just about to say, you're the one who actually introduced me to Terrain Party.
Yes. So you can take real world data. That was actually the query that I had from the United States Air Force. Hey, can we take and create real world stuff? And I showed them my tutorial on how to import real world environments into Unity via using Gaia, and they are, I'm assuming, busily using that. I've even had the Australian Defence Force ask similar sorts of questions. So let's just lift this up. Actually, no, you lift it up a bit more. Yeah, that'll do. Now just let's stamp that.
So just the one we just unticked was this one, ground base, and because of that, if I had that tick, I wouldn't be able to move it because it's just zeroing it out. It's clamping it down the bottom, isn't it? So it's not allowing me to move it at all.
Yeah.
And the stamp base and the show base, this is just for visualization.
Yeah, mostly just visualization. So let's just hit the stamp button. You know, there's a lot of, one of the things I really argue a lot with my, I debate a lot is how much information should I show you? How much control should I give you? So even though, this is what we're doing is something that's quite complex, but at the same time, I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. So in the next iteration of Gaia 2, I've hidden a bunch of this stuff because we don't need it. But, Gaia 1, it was actually my first release on the asset store. So, I was learning.
What about
so let's
an advanced, you like click the button and you've got the advanced interface and a beginner interface, or is just that too much?
Yeah, that's effort? Right. Something like that would make a lot more sense. So, 2020 hindsight, Gena, CTS is my most recent release. And, even as I learn how to build better user interfaces in Unity, the whole profile dress have been just press a button and it works, that type of concept. And then real-time feedback when you slide a slider, that's where I'm heading more and more with the way I do things. But the interesting thing with Gaia is actually procedurally generating a world is a complex thing. So I've tried to, the complexity is there if you want to dig into it, but in the normal workflow, I'll try and hide it from you. So we've got if you click the preview button on the stamper, that'll turn off the mesh. So there's our environment. So that's sitting out at 2 kilometers. Now what I want to do, so the stamping system is very, very powerful. Here this is actually a stamp based on a satellite scan, which I imported from Terrain Party. And now what I want to do is I want to actually put a river in the middle of our valley here. So we've got a bit of a low area anyway, but I want to actually customize this a bit more. So go into the rivers directory and see the Colorado River 2. Drag that onto your stamper. Yep. And just turn your preview back on. So now we've got the Colorado River. And instead of raising height, which is what we did last time, we're going to lower height. In fact, we're going to cut into the terrain. So let's go to, let's make it the stamp smaller.
How small do you want it, mate?
About a half the size of the terrain. I've never tried using this tool. Gaia makes sure that'll do. And then move that into the center of the terrain. You've just done something that I've never seen done. I learned something.
I do things that you're not supposed to do. Don't forget that.
So what's happening here is where this mesh sits below the terrain, it's going to be cut out of the terrain. So we're going to create this interesting little river valley in the center of this scene. Let's just, because we can, just to show people that it's possible, let's rotate the stamp.
Ooh.
And just, align it there, whichever way makes sense for you. Cool. Then let's move it a bit more to the left. And down a bit. No. Sort of down to the bottom left of the screen. Yeah, that's it. And then drop it down into the screen a bit more too.
As in?
Yeah, that'll do. All right. Now, what's going to happen is, at the moment, the operation type in the stamp is raise height, but we don't want to raise height, we want to lower height. So go into the stamper and select lower height.
Oops.
No, that's it. Beaut. So when we stamp this, it's now going to cut out of the terrain instead of adding to the terrain. So go and stamp this, and I'll show you the next major problem that people will have. And just turn off your preview. What you can see, and it's sort of hard to see, but we've actually cut directly out of the terrain, which is not really a great outcome. It looks pretty terrible. So I'm going to show you stamp blending, which is a really, really powerful feature of Gaia. So go into our stamper and hit undo.
And just like to point out, Gaia has an undo button.
Yeah, it's very, very, very useful.
So we just had a world creator in the other day and talking about how we've been waiting for an undo, and they got their undo. They've got their undo working at the moment.
All right, so this time go into your mask section on your stamper.
Yep.
And distance mask. There's all sorts of masking you can do, but we'll just use a distance. So choose the last default on your curve tool there. That one, yep. And then close this and open it again, because then Unity will actually give us the full screen. Now swap them. So on the left-hand side, make it at the top, and at the right-hand side, make it at the bottom. That's it. Move that up to one. No, up the top left.
The top and
yeah. I get you. And position it right, actually, on the corner of the quadrant, not off the bottom of the screen.
Where's it gone? Where are you gone, buddy? It's a good thing nobody can actually see my. Where's the last quadrant? There we go. No, where's that one?
That's it. Oh.
Yeah.
It's not lined up on 0, 0.
No.
See at the bottom left? Yeah, just drag it to the right.
You don't want to move.
Actually, let's just see what this does. We're going to experiment.
No.
That's it. So you can see Unity's got a 0 and a 1. I don't have an easy way to do this, unfortunately. So let's just close this.
It's like, now, I won't be able to sleep at night now. I'm like, but that wasn't perfect.
So what's happening here is, because the distance mask is from the distance of the center of the stamp. So what we want is on the left-hand side of the distance mask, it's 1, and at the right-hand side, it's 0. So what we're doing here is we're basically, at the center of the stamp, we want the full power of the stamp, and then we want to blend it out to nothing in the distance. So let's try stamping that again. So essentially what we're doing is we're influencing the way the stamp is applied to the terrain. So just scroll down.
The area mask button, drop down here. What would you use that for?
So sometimes you might want to stamp a road or a very specific village shape. So you can actually use images as masks. You can actually, if you just open that up, because I can't even remember, it's been so long. So you can use actual textures to mask your stamp as well. So if you've got a specific texture in your terrain, don't do this, but you can mask that stamp by that texture, so it'll only get applied where the texture is in your terrain. You can use various different types of noise to mask your stamp in as well, or use different channels on your source image. So there's a huge amount of power and ability to modify or modulate the way the stamp is applied to the terrain.
Just got a question here. Let me click the stamp while we look at the question. Can you show how to make a flat area to place a building, for example? Yeah, we'll do that later on, maybe.
We'll do that in a second.
We've got here, Adam, well, version 2 adds support for having rivers above sea level, potentially providing a mesh for the water level.
Well, it's funny you should ask that. Origami has the ability to create meshes procedurally. And then how you do stuff with them is based on whether they are, it's just based on the shader you put on them. So we could put a shader that does roads, for example, and that mesh could be used for a road. Or equally, just as equally, we could put Nature Manufacturer's RAM water shader on that mesh, and we've got a river. So Origami will have that feature. I don't know, I haven't gotten far enough into Gaia 2. I'm still working on the raw technology itself, but certainly, you know, rivers, roads, all these sorts of things are the sorts of things I want to bring to my toolkit, because essentially what I'm trying to build is a end-to-end workflow of tools to help you procedurally accelerate development of your game. So the good thing is, you know, in those screenshots I shared with you earlier, Anthony, you saw the roads. That's, you know, all I need to do is just follow the path of a valley, for example, and put a river shader on that mesh, and boom, we've got a river.
Yeah, everyone's getting a bit excited that I didn't show those in chat. Those are super secret special ones.
That's right, they're very secret.
Oh yeah, Yolan wasn't there at the start. If anyone wasn't there at the start, they're hearing origami and their eyebrows are getting a little bit raised, origami is one of the new secret toys that Adam was going to be releasing sometime soon.
Yes, hopefully in the next month. It's basically well advanced, and with origami you can, what it is, it's a, where Gaia and Gena are very much more oriented towards natural structures. This is more oriented to built structures. So putting, I guess, if you wanted to see, was there something that origami could do, then think of Dungeon Architect. With origami, you can generate those sorts of things. However, origami is an extensible system and capable of doing way, way more. And because I'm already a specialist in, fairly deep specialist in the terrain and that sort of stuff, I'm going to be adding a bunch of terrain automation features into origami as well. So that when you use this system, it might go, hey, flatten the terrain here, put a village here, build a road between this village and that village that you just put over there for me, and do what other weird stuff you invent in your game as well.
So it's like a natural progression of Gena, because you've got Gena to be able to spawn areas of interest, points of interest.
Yeah, so Gena will place this stuff into your scene, and I'll make it so that Gena can spawn origami into the origami templates into the scene as well. Although I was speaking to Cobus, I might even call them blueprints. So they'd be in a blueprint that would spawn something from that blueprint. And the interesting thing is, I'm talking to Cobus, and I'm also talking to some other studios about doing demonstrations where I take their modular kits and use origami to create infinite variations of that kit, but not just random infinite variations that follow rules. Because when you look at any environment always follows rules. There's always thought behind it. Even in nature, where the water flows, where the plants grow, how the plants grow, this always follows a set of rules. We're just not always aware of it. And our eye naturally picks up on this. So let's get some textures into. We're going to create a flat spot as well. So if you just turn off that preview, what we've done now is we've created a little river valley in the middle of our environment, and let's put a little flat spot. Yep. And then let's put over in our mountains, just find somewhere, maybe at the base of the mountains, at the top of that river valley there. Let's create a little flat spot for a village.
So there was a question earlier about where did you get the idea of the stamps from, the stamper?
Oh, so that's an interesting question. So I was thinking, one of the prototypes that I worked on before I built Gaia, as I thought, mountains are all much the same thing. You can think of a mountain as a series of ridges, and everything around that ridge line is then eroded. It's lower than the ridge line. So I built a little tool where I could click, 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 and draw the ridge line, and then started to, fill out essentially the sides of the mountain around that ridge line, the ridge line being the top of the contours of the mountain. And I was rotating this, and I went, holy shit, what if I use this what if I use that became the concept of a stamp. And what I ended up coming up with was, I think, much better. But even then, the ridge line, I have a whole bunch of ideas and things I'd love to do with that as well. Literally draw on your map where the ridge will be and have a beautiful, nicely eroded mountain range appear there on your map. But like everything, there's all these things you want to do, and then there's the amount of hours in the day, and it's always it's just hard because there's just lots to do. So let's go to hills, and we'll get a hill stamp, and we'll just choose a fairly flat one. So Rugged Hills 181 down the bottom right. That'll do. It's got a little bit of texture in there as well. Instead of what we'll do is we'll raise height. That's it.
We've got here the options of raise height, lower height, blend, and annoyingly nobody can actually see the the pop-up because
Oh, really?
capturing. So I click here, raise height. I've got options of raise height, lower height, blend height, stencil height, and difference height.
Yeah, stencil height's a really powerful feature too. Let's say you wanted to do a river or maybe a raised road or something. You create a mask for it, or you can use a stamp as a mask, and it will stencil. So it'll work just like a stencil. It'll either raise or lower the height of your terrain where that mask appears by that amount of height. And it's really powerful because you can use it to create raised sort of areas for roads or for bases or whatever. But we're going to use another technique right now. So let's move that. Oh, actually, we'll leave it where it is. Just drop that down a bit, that stamp, and keep going, and move it out to the right a bit because we want it to extend out at the base here, and then down at a bit to the bottom. That's it. Now notice. Let's zoom in on this stamp. It's actually, I designed this to be a sort of a little interesting hilly area, but we don't want interesting hills because we want a flat spot for a base. So let's change its height to say 0.5, and probably easier to do it in the inspector there. Yeah. Make it a little bit less flat than that, say 0.2 or something. Sometimes you want really, really flat, but I always find that really, really flat is visually not very interesting. I like a little bit of variation. When you get the bit of variation in your terrain, then as the light changes on the terrain, you get those nuances in the light. And then if you're doing interesting things, height and slope and so on with shading, a little bit of variation really helps a lot. I would actually still drop this down to 0.5 because we're going to build a base here. Now this thing already has a distance mask assigned, so that's pretty cool. We're going to leave that in place. So
this is inherited from the one that we did a moment ago, and we just
it's the same stamp. All we've done is change the stamp that we're stamping. So let's actually, I've even got a better idea for this. I've got another stamp. It's under ad hoc, I think. No. Where is it? Rocks. Okay, so these stamps here I used a Gaia has go into the Gaia manager, and I'll just show you something very, very cool.
Where's it gone? There we go.
Down the bottom there. So the actual Gaia manager itself, not the inspector. No, leave all that. Yep, cool. So under advanced, actually it's probably under utilities. Yeah, under utilities, go show scanner. And then just double click to find it. There's nothing in it. No, it's already there.
I remember you.
So this scanner, this allows you to add any stamp you like into Gaia. So you can drop a raw file on this and it'll create a Gaia stamp from it. You can drop a 3D mesh that's got a collider onto this and it'll create a stamp from that mesh. You can drop a
I didn't know you could do that from the meshes. That's tasty.
Yeah, well, see, the big rocks are actually made from a rock mesh. You can drop in World, what is it? It's not World Composer, World
Machine.
Not World Creator.
World
but there's World Machine. You can drop R16 files out of World Machine into this. You can even drop a terrain onto it. If you like a terrain and you want to make a stamp out of it so you can easily replicate it, drop your terrain onto this and it will create a stamp. In fact, let's do that. Drag your terrain object and where it says drop here to scan in the inspector.
Yeah, there. Just drop it in.
Yep. And now it's got this thing called a base level. Just drop that down. So base level is what Gaia uses when it's automatically creating environments. But look at that. So we've now created we've got the basis of a new stamp. So let's call this one, we'll call it a mountain. Give it a name.
Where am I going to give that?
Where it says feature name, just down a bit.
Yep.
Yep. Call it, mountain test. It's going to save it. It's called itself a mountain. I'd drop that base level down a little bit more. That'll do. And then go save.
And now it will stick inside here.
Yep. So let's delete the scanner out of our scene. And actually we'll just to show it, we'll
There it is. It's there.
Yeah.
Hello.
So drag that into your stamper. And then let's just lift that stamper up and make it bigger. And let's increase its height, because remember we shrunk this one way down.
Oh, I went up a little bit too right there.
If you go fit to terrain, it'll automatically size it and place it where the terrain is as well.
There we go.
Boom. So there you go. Now rotate it. So Gaia, one of the thought process behind Gaia is you should be able to do whatever you want with this tool. It's an extensible tool. So now you've got all of that really interesting environment you've just created. And you can replicate this, you can blend this. Yes, you can use Gaia for VR. Gaia just creates a terrain. It's just a Unity thing, right? So we'll actually use this, and actually we're going to go back to our rocks. Now let's go back to our rocks because we're going to build a base. So we'll drag that onto it. Yep. So let's go down into the scene and zoom right in. And so notice how it's like an interesting sort of shape here. Let's make it a bit bigger because we're going to create a nice sort of, this originally was a 3D mesh, but we're going to create a rock base, an interesting rock base. And then let's just move over to somewhere where we want this nice sort of relatively flat area to be. Yeah, and bring it out a bit. We'll have it jutting out and towards the river. Well, that'll do. Rotate it to wherever you want it. Maybe drop it down a little bit more. Maybe raise it up a bit. And then its height. Oh, okay. Let's just zoom in and turn off the preview and go stamp. Now we've still got our distance mask on, so that's why it's blended in nicely. Just set that back to a straight line. Yeah. Then just hit stamp again.
Oh, I did undo.
Wait, yeah, it doesn't matter. You can do both. There we go. Now we've raised that nicely out. And we've got those few little rocks that we had in there as well. Now let's grab that same stamp and move it over and create another level. Yep. And then drop it down a bit. Maybe lift it a bit. And move it over a bit more so we've got, quite a nice base area here. And there was a guy, Frank Slater, who I've been talking to, who was on your last Twitch. He's got a really, really nice path tool, which would be really cool for creating a nice road between the upper and the lower level. But just go stamp. And boom, just turn off the preview. Now we've created a cool little sort of area, which was originally based on a 3D model. And so when we go in here, we look at this and go, oh, that's a bit chunky. So the cool thing about Gaia is it's just Unity terrain, right? So let's just use the terrain smooth tool to round those edges off a bit. Yep. And make that
make it a little bit smaller. But you've got a tool yourself inside Gaia, don't you, for smoothing, if I remember?
Oh, you can actually, you can smooth the overall terrain, but we want to just smooth this area here. So just, there you go, sort of get rid of those sort of little rough edges there. So, that gives you a sense of how Gaia can do the macro, but it also gives you a huge amount of control over the micro detail in your environment. And, that looks pretty cool. I would actually, at the back of that stamp, I'd flatten that out a bit. Yep, beautiful. And then right at the back. So that's a really interesting little area for us to build our base on for the environment. All right, so now we've spent all this time creating our terrain, mostly because we're busy talking. Let's actually texture it. So I guess the point I want to make here is this is the power of Gaia. It allows you to design the environment you want. It's got a random generator as well, but when I've been given projects to do, it's usually, could you do this? It needs to have this, 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 and this. And one of the reasons why I created Gaia was to allow you to have that power to design the environment to suit your game rather than to suit your game to the environment. So let's go back to Gaia Manager. And now we want to click on Create Spawners. So we're up to step 2 in the 1, 2, 3 process.
So this one here, number 2, we did create terrain and show stamper. We played about. We even created a stamp out of the terrain that we made, which just blew my mind, by the way, just like to say. And now we've got create spawners. Yep.
So what Gaia's done now is it's used those rules and those resources files to create a whole bunch of spawners. And now we want to actually apply those resources into the terrain. And the process of applying stuff into the environment is what I call spawning. I just couldn't think of another better name. So click on the texture spawner, the coverage texture spawner, and just hit spawn.
So this is taken from the scriptable object that you showed us at the start.
Yes. And what comes with Gaia is a whole bunch of rules, a whole bunch of pre-configured stuff. This stuff, once you understand how it works, it's hugely customizable. You can customize how you what types of textures, how you apply them, what types of plants, how you apply them, groups of structures, all this sort of stuff can be done. But like all things, the more you dig into it, then it's one of those things that gets a little bit deeper. Well, as soon as we're almost there. I was going to explain some other cool stuff. What's actually happening is it's running this spawner across every square meter of the environment and running those texture rules against it to work out what textures it can paint and where.
There we go.
Yeah, the graphs can be a little bit more complex. So what Gaia's done is it's spawned everything relative to sea level, and it's used, combination of slope and height. It's used things like Perlin noise and various other noises to where you've got areas which are pretty much the same from a slight and hope perspective. It's actually added a bit of variation in there because variation is what adds interest to your game. It sort of catches our eye. And if you look at this, you can also see that, because this is standard Unity terrain, there's a bit of tiling there. This is what I would call phase 1 of the terrain. Actually, we'll go to phase 2. Now let's talk about, we'll come back to Gaia in a second. Now let's use CTS to make this pretty.
And we'll be continuing this tutorial in our next video. We'll be delving into more Gaia and CTS. So guys, if you do like these videos, click on that big, juicy, red subscribe button down below. Tell all your friends, your neighbours, random people on the street. The Messy Coder is on Twitch, he's on YouTube, he's on Twitter, he's on Facebook, he's anywhere that you can find somebody spamming some content. And if you do like it, click it. Till next time. If you want to see more of my crazy videos, click on the left side of your screen now, and down below there's that big juicy subscribe button, and right next to it is the magic bell that if you click it, it will tell you if I've got a new video coming out. Till next time.